icon jump up on your screen, if you're cool with that. Okay. So there we go. Okay, cool. Now, let me talk a little bit about this class super briefly, and then I'm going to go over several different things, kind of expectations and like assignments, expectations, and then what this class is about and things like that. And then why I kind of like to have the Zoom classes. Traditionally before COVID, we would have been meeting in person and, during the week. But as some of our classes have gone online, we've done this, distance learning style. I kind of think the Zoom class is cool because that way we can at least kind of see each other and talk and have discussions, which we're going to do plenty of. Just a little background about me. So I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, but I was a youth pastor for a long time before I went into the clinical world. I actually have a degree in Christian education as well. And so I have taught and worked with families and churches and marriages at various degrees for about 25 years. So I have kind of all that experience. However, this is the first time I've ever taught this particular class. So you're going to be going through some new stuff, and so am I. Some new thoughts probably, and so am I. And I'm going to learn just as much from you as hopefully you learn from me. And so one of my big goals, and this is true for me when I teach anyway, I try to learn as much as I can from the students that I have, because everyone here has got different experiences. I guarantee you theologically we might be different, and that's cool. I think it's good. At the same time, there's going to be some stuff that we're going to talk about that probably we do have alignment with, which will be good. But the goal of this class is not necessarily to just walk away with a grade. Hopefully, it's been engaging enough that you can actually think through like what the family ministry look like and what would that be like and why would we need that. Having said that, back when I started in ministry a while ago, any kind of family ministry was pretty foreign. If you look traditionally at churches, pretty much every denomination, there's been some form of like youth ministry of some kind, usually, or children's ministry of some kind, not necessarily always family ministry. And if there was, maybe it was something, that was kind of separate from those things. And now it's a little different in that you might have I know some churches that do have family ministries where they might have a family minister that would be over all of those things. And then they would have separate kind of ministries underneath them. That's probably been happening now for the past, I'd say 10 or 15 years, 20, maybe 20 years. So that's a way of thinking about family life ministry. At the same time, hopefully we can start thinking about that in some different ways. The textbook that we have for this class is pretty lengthy. I don't know if any of you, hopefully you've gotten it or have it. It's been around for a while. There's some things in there that I kind of like, and there's some things I'm like, okay, that's all right. It's cool if we critique the book as we go. And actually, I'm thinking, I'm always looking for, new material. So we'll kind of think through that too. But some of the foundational things in the book I think are super helpful. There's not necessarily like a set reading schedule of the book necessarily, like have this read by this week. It's kind of on your own more than anything. But there are, like the third assignment especially, which I'm going to talk about in a second. The third assignment especially will kind of call on you to have already read certain aspects of the book, because there's questions in there that will basically come straight from the text that you're reading. And so the reading the book will be important. There are no exams in this class. There are just 4 assignments for the class, leading up to a kind of a capstone assignment at the very end that I will go over. We will meet a couple of other times, Zoom wise, in this class. When we meet via Zoom, it's meant to be pretty practical as much as we can be. So we'll have discussions about different things. And then obviously answering questions and, going over anything that you guys have questions about. Since this is a new class for me, we can kind of do this class however we want, however we want to do it. And so I'm going to ask for y'all's input too today, here kind of towards the end, to talk through that. Originally, I was going to meet until 1:30, but I'm going to meet until 1 today because I've got kind of a hard stop at 1 o'clock. And so I want to be mindful of that. But I'll keep the time. You won't have to worry about that. I have put like an intro PowerPoint slide up on Moodle if you want to see that. You don't have to. I'm going to actually share my screen so you can see it there. Then I need to move everyone around so I can actually see you too. Okay. So there's 4 assignments for this class, and I'm going to go over those here. Everything's on Moodle. Everything's already loaded up on Moodle, and when you click on the actual assignments, you'll see a lot more in depth than I'm giving you. I'm just kind of hitting some highlights here for you. And so the first thing is, the first assignment is really an observe and reflect assignment. Some of these assignments I've taken from Dr. Paul, who has traditionally taught this class, because I kind of like the assignments. I've changed up a couple of things, but for the most part, it's kind of the class he's taught and the assignments that he's had for a long time, mainly because they're really good assignments. But this first assignment, I've actually done a version of this assignment too. In my PhD program, I had to do something like this. But what you're going to do is you're going to go to a place, kind of preferable going to a place like somewhere you're not really familiar with. But after COVID, we kind of loosened up some of the guidelines here. But you're going to select a site or a place that's frequented by families that you don't normally encounter. Could be a place of business, a service, an organization that works with families. I've actually done observations. This is going to sound really strange, but like in the mall at like play areas, family law courts, I've done observations in. I went to a Medicaid office, and when we lived in Lubbock, I went to a Medicaid office. Actually befriended a couple of folks there, and went and observed places there. You could go I'm just giving, like, there's lots of different places where families go. This is the caveat that I kind of talked to a couple of people about this, because the one thing about doing this, it makes sometimes students get uncomfortable, maybe thinking that people are like, why is this person here, like, observing? If you go to a pretty crowded place, then you kind of blend in. The goal of this is really the observation and the reflection, and thinking about kind of the opening passage to read is John 4, the woman at the well, and kind of reflecting and making observations on that, and taking that and going to observe people, especially families, where families might be. And literally, you're going to write a reflection paper on your experience observing whatever that site is. There's actually 3 different questions that you can answer here for the reflection paper. Like, what did you see that impacted you? How would that how would that inform your view of family life ministry? How could a family life ministry, address those families? And so it's really made to kind of help you start thinking about how you could help and what that family life ministry would be. And a lot of times, what I have found with assignments like this, at least for me, what's helped is it makes you kind of get out of your own box. It makes you get out of your own comfort zone and makes you kind of think. And sometimes we do our best thinking and reflection when we do that. So that's the first assignment. And again, this is There's a lot more detail on Moodle about that, but that's the first thing that you're gonna do, and then you'll turn in that paper to me. And there's a box there on Moodle that you'll just put that submit that paper to. The length up there, 3 to 5 pages, which basically means you're just going to answer those questions. I'd love it if you didn't go over 5 pages. If you can kind of keep it short and to the point, I'm a fan of that personally. That helps me a lot. And if I speak just kind of, I guess selfishly, I have to grade like 100 papers, once a month. And if you guys keep it to about 5 pages, that's awesome. That'd be great. At the same time, I realized that, and I've seen this before when you do assignments like this. Sometimes some things hit you differently than you thought it would, and I know that sometimes people need to write more, and that's fine. That's why there's 3 to 5 page. If I'd have said 4 to 6, you'd probably give me 8 or 10. So if I say 3 to 5, we'll probably get within that 4 to 6 range. Does that make sense? Hopefully.
Yes.
Okay. And like I said, you can read more about it on Moodle just to kind of see more about that. Okay. The second one.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Dr.
Yeah.
Bedard. This is Stephanie. Yeah. Hi. Sorry, I was a little late.
No,
on this assignment, real quick, I've already done extensive observations in a particular environment. So can I, or do I need?
Sure.
Okay. Okay.
Absolutely.
Cool. Thanks.
Do you mind telling us where?
Yeah, prisons. There are families in prisons, and it's full of them in the waiting room, the visiting rooms, and then also the families preparing to go in and having to travel there. And how do you do family counseling? So
good. Yeah. Oh, that's perfect. That's good. Yeah, I mean, you can be creative here. You can be creative. I got the idea about Chick-fil-A before I even had kids, because I am a marriage and family therapist. So I have this, my wife calls it this weird antenna for people that are getting in arguments, and I hear it and I want to help them like automatically, even though I'm not really there for them. And so you just can get creative, I think, with this. Any other questions about this assignment? Okay. The second one is basically a class that you're going to develop, a biblical basis for family life ministry. And again, there's a lot more detail on Moodle for you. This one is kind of, I obviously teach in the Amber team, but teaching is I'm a very passionate teacher. And I also have learned over the years that different people obviously teach differently, but also develop their teaching outline or what they're going to teach in different ways. So what we've tried to do is give you a little bit of a format to turn in to me, knowing that some people might write like word for word everything they're going to teach, and it might be a long document. I don't want that. Okay. The outline piece is fine for me. Okay. But it's got to be, what's the biblical basis for a family life ministry? Like if you were going to teach this concept at the church you're at or another church, or you were talking about it and someone wanted you to teach more about, like, heard you talk about it, what would you do? How would you teach that? What would you get them, how would you get that across to people? And so you can be creative with it, but when you turn what you're going to turn in is just not your full manuscript, but you can do full sentence outlines of how you would teach and what you would teach. Now, having said that, I'm going to make a lot of assumptions that a lot of you have taught before and taught on different things. So you have your own kind of way of doing things or kind of way of developing the things you teach over. I think that's fine. Just as long as what you turn into me wouldn't be like your full manuscript, but a good outline that would still get your point across. What's good about that to me also is it might make you think about, anytime you can condense down something that you've talked about a lot, condense it down into, a sentence or two, that means you really thought about it. And you really had to put a lot of thought into it. And I think that can be helpful for you too. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Hopefully. I'm actually going to do this one myself too.
You actually answered my question when you were speaking. I was going to ask if there was a template or something, like if we do teach, if we use our own.
Oh shoot, you're cutting out. You cut out the end, but I think are you asking, can you use whatever template you typically use? Because you cut out there at the end. Yeah, you can if you guys have kind of a template form that you typically use, I think that's fine. As long as it gets your whatever, I still need to understand what you're teaching and how you're teaching it and what you're trying to do. I have my own kind of template too. I kind of do my own kind of thing. And most of the time it's something you developed over time. Any other questions about that one?
Not yet.
Okay. The third assignment is, I alluded to this before, it's that personal application of family ministry. It's discussion questions. So there's 5 questions there. This will be a way that I kind of know you're going through the material, the book material. But there's also some application involved too, as well. Some kind of some processing and synthesizing what you're learning, what you're thinking about. So that's what those questions are for. And again, this is going to be a document that you're going to type up and turn into me. And the questions I think are pretty straightforward, but they're going to cause you to think a little bit too. So that's the third assignment. That one's pretty straightforward, I think. The fourth assignment that we're going to talk about, the second class, I'm going to go into a little more in depth. Again, there's more information on Moodle about it, but I've basically given you guys a survey. It's a congregational needs analysis survey with just some basic information there. And so you're going to develop a document that like a demographic picture of the families that were surveyed. You're going to look at any preventative programs you would suggest for families in the survey. Any therapeutic programs you might suggest for families, like, do we want to develop a premarital therapy program, or is something else jumping out at you as you read through the survey? You're also going to develop a ministry plan of action, which there's 4 different steps here that we're going to look at. After you've analyzed the data, what's your plan of action? How would you implement this? What would that look like? Like, are there activities you would suggest? Are there certain programs you would suggest? And what would those programs look like and why? One of the big things that I feel like is important as we think through like programs of any kind is like, why are we doing this? What's it for, obviously, but why are we doing it? What's the why? Why is actually really important, because it should kind of guide our ideas to a certain extent. Obviously, there's going to be certain needs. As you read this survey, there's going to be needs that might jump off the page at you. Maybe there's things you've kind of worked in, areas you've worked in before, and those things might jump off the page at you. But why is that important? Why did that jump off the page at you? Why do you feel like this is going to be something that would be helpful? So that why is actually very, very important. And it should probably go beyond like, well, we've always done things this way. Well, that's fine. Traditions are awesome, but is that the only reason? Are there other reasons why? And there could be multiple reasons why we do, we want to do certain things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yes.
Okay. Again, this particular one, we'll talk a little bit more about it. Second class. Oh, and FYI, you have $25,000 to use. So that's a lot. I mean, to me, that was a lot. This is like I think the survey we got is like a 200 individuals that responded. So you're going to get the data. The data is already on Moodle. There's 3 different files there. You can start looking at it anytime you want. So it's the congregational needs analysis and your plan of action are the 2 different sections that you're going to be thinking about. Okay. Those are the 4 assignments. So at the end of the 4th assignment, you'll all be like experts and pros at family life ministry. Now, let's talk a little bit about some expectations and focus of the class. And so I talked about this a little bit earlier. The textbook itself is divided up into sections, and then the sections have chapters. This is probably where I'm pretty easygoing as an instructor. I kind of let students kind of read at their own pace. So I'm not going to micromanage how you're reading or if you're reading. I'm going to let you do that yourself. I'm actually reading the book too, FYI. So I've gotten I think I'm about 3 chapters in. So we'll all be reading together. But the textbook readings themselves, that's at your own pace. You guys can read that. I do think it's good to read this book front to back. Sometimes you can skip around. I guess you could do that. I think it's good to read this one front to back. And there's some good information in there, I think, that can help as well. The second expectation in terms of like Zoom class participation, these are not mandatory, but hopefully they're helpful for you because we will have discussions as a class as well. I'll do that in a couple different ways. One, I might like ask a question like right now, like, hey, where's everybody from? Or what have you been doing or whatever? I might ask certain questions and we'll just kind of throw it open to the class like this. But we will also have breakout rooms. I can put you guys into rooms of 3 or 4 students at a time and ask you, and we're actually going to do this here in a second, and ask a couple of questions that you guys talk to each other about, and then we come back and talk about it as a whole. So we will do a lot of that as well with the Zoom classes. I will record the Zoom classes, so if you miss something, you can watch the recording or listen to the recording. So those classes are not mandatory, but hopefully they're helpful. The key focus of this class will be in the design, development, and delivery of a comprehensive family life ministry. That's kind of what every assignment's leading you towards and thinking about. We tried to design it so it's kind of like soup to nuts, like from the beginning, kind of I've been thinking about this to what's the biblical foundation for this? What would this look like? And how would I actually implement this? Is kind of the thought process behind it, at least with the assignments and the kind of the sequence of the class. We want to focus on the preventative and therapeutic resources for families in the church and the community. And that's probably because that's kind of my thoughts about it, knowing that if we can help prevent certain things and also have therapeutic resources for folks along the way, that's a really good combination, I think, for human beings, just in general. we're also going to just explore the theological foundations for ministry to families. There's definitely biblical stories about families all over Old Testament, New Testament. There's not a lot of parenting classes going on in the Bible. There's not a lot of premarital counseling going on in the Bible. There's some jacked up family dynamics going on in the Bible, for sure. Got that. I do find it, this is just an aside, I do find it interesting after Abraham almost sacrifices his son, there's never a discussion with them two involved the rest of the time in the Old Testament, which I kind of find interesting. So there's things like that. There's also great stories like Jesus' parents went 3 days before they realized he wasn't with them. He was about 12 years old. That's kind of interesting. That's like a CPS kind of thing now.
Yeah.
So there, you know, we have these interesting stories, and those are family related stories. I bring these things up because I love that the Bible's not like this. There's messes in there, man. I mean, God knows we live in a messy place, and he doesn't spare us the mess because he knows that's what we live in. I think that's actually kind of cool. There's not any other religious documents that would potentially portray a view of everything not being perfect. The Bible's not one of them. So there's stories, right? We have lots of stories that can give us a lot of good foundational meaning. But theologically speaking, how do we, you know, what's our theology, or what's our theological foundation to the ministry of families? I think that's a great thing to kind of think through. And that's kind of what, hopefully that's the things we're kind of thinking through as we go. Does that make sense? Hopefully.
Yeah, very much.
Okay. Now, I am going to do something I love doing. I like putting people in groups and letting them talk. I actually do this if I teach in person too. So I'm going to put you guys into groups, probably 3 or 4 folks in a group. And literally, besides like introducing yourself, like, you know, who you are, where you are, and what, like, why you're taking this class, that kind of thing. I'd love for you guys to talk a little bit about, hey, what's my expectation for this class? Like, I've given you kind of my expectations of what we're going to do. What's your expectation? I want to know that. That would be helpful to me, I think. What's your interest in this class? That would be helpful. And what are your experiences with Family Life Ministry, if any? I'd love to know that too. What's that look like? So if you'll kind of discuss those 3 areas together in these groups, I'll let you do that for probably a little bit, like 7, 8, maybe 9 minutes, because some of this might take a little bit, depending on who's the talker. We got probably, you know, if we got some talkers, it's going to take a little longer, and that's cool. I'm good with that because I'm a talker, big time. My house is very verbal, so we got 4 talkers in my house, so I get it. Some people aren't as much talkers, and that's cool too. But I'm going to give you guys a healthy amount of time just to kind of think through that and talk about that. Then we'll come back, and I want to hear from you, and I'll ask some questions kind of as follow-up, and then we'll be done. So let me put you guys in the groups. I'm going to stop sharing, and you'll get a little pop-up there. You'll just click on the little pop-up there. You should have it there on your screen. And once you click that, it'll take you right to your group.